Hello, welcome back to the kitchen. In this video, I'm going to show you how to brine a small ham. Now, some people call this gammon, but it's a small ham, and I'm going to be doing it in a very particular way. Rather than brining it in a bucket or dry curing it, I'm going to be brining it in a bag. Now, there's a special technique I use for this, certainly for sealing it in the bag, and I'll cover that later in the video because I'm going to be using a standard vacuum sealer machine that you can buy and use at home. So don't miss that bit because that's a key step. Before we get to that step, let's make the brine. So let me talk you through some of the ingredients we've got here. So we are going to be using a litre of cold water. Into that litre of cold water we have 100 grams of salt. That can go straight in there. And I've got some Prague powder number 1. That can go straight in there as well. Got 14 grams of that. That can all go in there. That is a mixture of sodium nitrite and salt, and that's going to give us our curing agent to give it the nice pink colour for the ham. Into the brine, I'm going to be adding some muscovado sugar, some cracked black pepper, and that's 2 teaspoons of cracked black pepper, 1 teaspoon of ground star anise, and I've got half a teaspoon of ground fennel. And all I've done with that fennel is I've taken the seeds, put it in a pestle and mortar and busted them up. Now, one important thing to note, when I make this brine, I'm going to be injecting it into the ham. So if you come down and have a look here, there are some elements on this brine recipe that don't dissolve into the brine. So I'm going to be adding these later. I'm going to add the sugar now, because obviously that does dissolve into the brine. And I'm going to stir this up now, and we'll come back to this when this is dissolved. Okay, the brine is now being dissolved. I had a little bit of a spillage, but only just about a teaspoonful, nothing to worry about. If you do spill a significant amount, that can be a problem. And actually, that's one of the advantages of brining in a bag. Certainly, the traditional way of brining is usually into a bucket, and whenever you put fluids into a bucket and then meat inside that, there's always a chance of that spilling. With the bag, that reduces that chance, and obviously it means we can put it into the fridge and not have to worry too much about it. Might just stick it or keep it in a container just so that I can take it in and out of the fridge without worrying. But you know, if it does happen to fall over in the fridge, once it's sealed, it's not going to be a problem. So I have here a brine injector, usually for scaring children when it's their time for vaccinations. This won't hurt a bit. But what we need to do now is to ensure when we brine this ham, we don't want it to brine for too long. So by injecting it with a little bit of that brine, what we're going to do is speed up the curing process. So down onto the meat. Now, brining can be a bit of a messy task. So my 1 kilogram, 1 kilogram, is kilogram a real measure, is it? Or is it a kilogram? Right, take 2. 1 kilogram of ham, and this is, well, it's not ham yet, it's essentially a pork joint, a pork roasting joint. You'll also see that I've actually put a little bit of extra trussing on there to keep it together. But I'm going to basically inject this ham, and the way we do it is we plunge our needle into the brine, we draw up a syringe full, and then we plunge it into the meat, and as we squeeze it in, we pull the needle out. And we want to do this at inch intervals.
Okay, I've paused the video here for a second just to tell you a little bit more about injection brining. When this is done commercially with hundreds of needles, it's possible to increase the weight of the meat by around about 10% purely with brine. Now, because we're using a much larger needle and we don't have the luxury of hundreds of very small brine needles which can enter the meat very precisely, we will never achieve a 10% rise in weight. So for us, that's just theory. Back to the video.
It can be quite messy. Don't be too eager with the old syringe because it can get you. Any that flows out of here we're not going to waste. Obviously we're going to reintroduce to the bag. So we'll keep filling this up, and every inch or so, or every couple of centimetres, we're going to be adding some brine. And we're looking for the muscle groups here. And we just want to make sure that is completely infused with this lovely brine. Get a bit more brine in there. There we go. It's not a technique that's often used. This can actually cut down your curing time in half. In fact, many modern gammons and hams that you buy now from the shops, certainly the sort of more cost-effective ones, I meant cheaper by that, they tend to have brine injected into them, then vacuum sealed, and then they're put straight into cold storage, and literally they brine while they're waiting on the shelf. So as I'm pulling the needle out, I'm pressing the plunger down a little bit, and just so that we get as much brine into this as we can. And this will ensure that we have a nice even cure all the way through. Now, if you don't have a brine injector, don't worry, you can still get a similar sort of effect to this by piercing the meat with a spike. And for that, there we go, I think there's enough brine in there. For that, you can use either a wooden stick like this, one of these bamboo kebab skewers. You can poke that in. If you're gonna just make holes in the meat for the brine to naturally infuse into or through, what you want to do is go about 1 centimetre apart and right the way through both sides, and make sure you get it under the skin as well, so that you get best effect. Right, so we've now injected our ham. We want to now put this into the bag, so we're going to do that now. Just have a bit of a clear up here. So we've got our brining bag, and this is a vacuum sealer bag. It's we call them Combi Fresh bags, and these are the ones that have a ribbed side on them, so they draw out a vacuum, which can be a bit of a problem if you've got a vacuum machine which doesn't have a wet setting, which is what I have. So that's the technique I'm going to show you later. But first of all, we want to get this into the bag, and we're just going to plop that straight in there. And obviously we're not going to waste this brine, that's going to go in. Now the other thing that's going to go into this brine is all the other ingredients, like the pepper, the ground star anise and the fennel. So we'll get those in now. And then we'll add the rest of the brine. Don't worry if you haven't taken a note of the ingredients. I'll leave all the ingredients in the instruction and in the description of the video, so that if you need to refer to it, you can. But we'll just add this brine. And remember, there's a litre of brine here. Looks like a little bit of that muscovado sugar hasn't dissolved, but we'll throw that in as well. Swill it round and make sure it all goes in there. Okay, so the big issue now we have with this bag is that my vacuum sealer machine doesn't have a wet setting. So you have to be a little bit careful with this. You don't want to draw the air out the bag and then suck all the fluid into the machine, because that will ruin the machine. So what we have to do, it's probably easier if you can see what I'm doing when I lift this up. So I'm going to lift this up here. Okay, so yeah, come around the side and you can catch that. And let me just reposition this camera here so we can get that. Okay. So let me just do this. There we go. That's okay. It's always good to sometimes reposition the camera so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move the bag and lay it down onto the heat bar, making sure that the open end is just inside where it draws the vacuum. And very carefully, I'm going to close the lid without moving the position. That's all locked in there. Now, I'm just going to lift the machine up a fraction, and I'll talk you through this before I actually do it. I'm going to press vacuum seal. Watch this come up, and it's helpful because the brine is a slightly different colour, so we can see it in contrast to the bag. As soon as it gets up to here, I'm going to cancel this and then seal it. So let's do that, okay? So we're going to go vacuum seal, cancel and seal. So I want to get as much air out as possible. Don't have to get every drop out, it's fine. Some vacuum sealers have a wet function and you don't need to worry about this particular technique, but the way I set this up is so that I've got this elevated, so you're never going to be able to lay the bag down flat. Now you'll see there that that's got a really nice seal on it, okay? But what I do, just for safety's sake and just for belt and braces, I'll put that across the heat bar again and I'll give that a second seal. So we'll just go in there and we'll press seal, let that run a cycle, and then that is ready to go. And there we are, we have 2 seals across that bag. I can now take this out and you can see that that is perfectly covered in brine. Now, obviously I want that to be covered in brine all the time, and you can see just sitting there in the fridge, that will be covered in brine. So that's good. And all we need to do now is to put the date on this and talk about how long we're going to cure this for. So today's date is the 10th of December. So I'll write this on here. So we're going to go 10, 12, and we're going to cure this for between 10 to 14 days. So anywhere between the 20th to the 24th of December, this will be ready to go. So you can see my timing is absolutely perfect for Christmas. And when this comes out the fridge, I'll take you through the whole process that we're going to adopt for turning this into a beautiful gam stroke ham for Christmas. Right, well, here's our gammon. Now this has been in the fridge for a couple of days now and it's curing nicely. It's still got a way to go. Right, get this back in the fridge.
With the gammon now cured, it's time to remove it from the brining bag and place it in a pan of fresh water. You'll be reassured to know there's no need to soak this small ham in fresh water before cooking, as I only used a medium strength brine. Gas on and bring the ham up to a simmer. When the ham reaches a simmer, I use my heat probe to measure the internal temperature of the ham, so I know when it's just cooked. You can get these devices online and they take all the guesswork out of cooking large cuts of meat like ham. You can see here I'm aiming for an internal temperature of 74 degrees Celsius. Once your ham reaches its target temperature, remove it from the water, placing it on a chopping board and wrap it in cling film, allowing it to cool thoroughly. When you want to serve the gammon, all you need to do is remove the skin, leaving behind as much fat as possible. Score it with a knife and spike it with a few cloves before brushing it with honey and roasting it in a hot oven at 185 degrees Celsius for a fan oven for 15 to 20 minutes until the fat has begun to turn brown. And there you go, it's as easy as that. I didn't manage to get any pictures of the finished gammon because we ate it on Christmas Day and my GoPro was having a day off. What a shame, perhaps next time, eh? I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, take care of yourself folks, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.